Captain Deho stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the flames spread across the mining colony below. The raiders had come in the night as they always did. Their black ships moved like shadows between the asteroids, striking fast and hard before anyone could respond. "Captain, we have orders from the Council," his communications officer said. "We are to withdraw immediately. No engagement with hostile forces." Deho looked at the screen showing the colony. Families lived down there. Children who had never seen Earth. Workers who had spent their whole lives pulling precious metals from the rocks of space. The raiders were burning their homes and taking everything they had built. "Sir, the Council orders are very clear," the officer said again. "I heard you the first time," Deho replied. He watched another building explode on the surface. "All ships attack formation. We go in now." The human fleet moved toward the colony like angry wolves. Their ships were not as pretty as the Council vessels. They were built for war, not for show. Thick armor covered their hulls. Heavy weapons stuck out from every angle. They looked dangerous because they were dangerous. The raiders saw them coming and tried to run. They were fast, but not fast enough. Deho's ships caught them before they could escape to hyperspace. The battle was quick and brutal. The human weapons tore through the raider ships like paper. In minutes, it was over. "Colony is secure, Captain," his tactical officer reported. "All raider vessels destroyed." Deho nodded. "Send down medical teams. Help with the wounded." 3 days later, Ambassador Hai-Jin sat in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime. The chamber was huge, with seats for representatives from dozens of worlds. The alien delegates looked down at her with expressions she had learned to read over the years. Disappointment, anger, fear. The Altaran ambassador spoke first. His people were tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to glow in the light. They were known across the galaxy for their wisdom and their long lives. Some Altarans lived for 1,000 years and they never forgot anything. "Once again, humanity has ignored our direct orders," the Altaran said. Captain Deho was told to withdraw from the Kepler mining colony. Instead, he attacked the raiders. "The raiders were killing innocent people," Hai-Jin replied. "We saved lives." "You started another war," the Vextai representative said. The Vextai looked like giant insects with 4 arms and eyes that could see in all directions. They were masters of mathematics and logic. Everything they did was calculated and precise. "The raiders will now attack 3 more colonies in revenge. More people will die because of your actions." "More people would have died if we did nothing," Hai-Jin said. "You do not know that," the Mordun elder whispered. The Mordun were the oldest race in the galaxy. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. Their bodies were made of crystalline structures that sang when they moved. "Your species thinks only of the moment. You do not see the larger picture." Hai-Jin had heard these arguments before. For 50 years, humanity had been part of the Galactic Council. For 50 years, they had been told they were too violent, too quick to fight, too dangerous to be trusted with important decisions. The council chamber fell silent as the speaker rose from the center of the room. The speaker was chosen from all the races to lead the council. This cycle, it was an Altaran named Veltar who had lived for 800 years. "We have reached a decision," Veltar announced. "Humanity has had enough chances to prove they can be civilized. They have failed every test. They choose violence over diplomacy. They ignore our wisdom. They cannot be trusted to maintain galactic peace." Hai-Jin felt her stomach drop. She knew what was coming. "Therefore, by unanimous vote of the Galactic Council, humanity is hereby expelled from civilized space. All trade agreements are cancelled. All technology sharing is ended. All territorial protections are removed. You have 30 standard cycles to remove all human presence from Council, space, and return to your home system." The words hit. Hai-Jin like physical blows, expelled, cast. Out alone. "This is a mistake," she said, standing up. "You need us. Who will fight when diplomacy fails? Who will stand up to the real threats?" "We have managed the galaxy for 1,000,000 years without human violence," the Vextai said. "We will manage for 1,000,000 more." Back on Earth, Admiral Minho read the Council's decision in his office at Fleet Command. Rain pounded against the windows of the building. The sky was dark with storm clouds that matched his mood. His aide, Commander So Young, stood beside his desk. She had been with him at many diplomatic meetings with the Council. She knew how hard they had all worked to find a place for humanity among the stars. "What are your orders, sir?" So Young asked. Minho looked at the star charts on his wall. Red pins marked every human colony. every mining station, every research outpost scattered across the galaxy. Millions of people who would now have to abandon their homes and return to Earth. "Start the evacuation," he said quietly. "All civilian populations first. Essential personnel can stay until the last moment." And Captain Daeho, Minho almost smiled. Daeho had started this whole mess by doing exactly what any decent human being would do. He had saved lives. Now they were all paying the price. "Daeho gets a medal," Minho said. "And a promotion. The council thinks we're too violent. Maybe they're right. Maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs." So Young looked confused. "Sir?" "Nothing," Minho said. "Just thinking out loud. Send the orders. 30 cycles to pack up 50 years of human civilization. We better get started." On the edge of council space, Dr. Ji-hoon was working late in his research station. He studied deep space phenomena, things that happened in the dark between the stars. His work was important but not exciting. Most days he looked at radiation patterns and gravitational anomalies that no one else cared about. Tonight was different. His instruments were picking up something strange. Something big was moving in the void beyond the galaxy's edge. The energy readings were unlike anything in the databases. Whatever it was huge and it was coming their way. Ji-hoon ran the scans 3 more times to be sure. Each time the results were the same. A massive fleet of unknown ships was heading toward council space. Their technology was completely alien. Their intentions were unknown. He sent his findings to Earth immediately. Then, after a moment of hesitation, he sent them to the council as well. Whatever was coming, it was bigger than human and alien politics. It was a threat to everyone. The reply from the council came back within hours. They dismissed his report as human hysteria and a desperate attempt to remain relevant. They thought he was making it up to scare them into keeping humanity in the council. Even when other censors confirmed his readings, the council refused to believe it. As far as they were concerned, this was just another human problem. Soon humans would be gone and their problems would go with them. Ji-hoon stared at his instruments as the unknown fleet grew closer. In 30 cycles, all humans would be forced to leave this part of space. Whatever was coming would be the council's problem to handle. He just hoped they would be ready for it. Because from what his sensors were telling him, the galaxy had never faced anything like this before. The council had gotten their wish. They were about to find out what the galaxy looked like without humans to fight their battles for them. 20 cycles had passed since the council's decision. Human colonies across the galaxy were emptying like water from a broken cup. Ships loaded with families and their belongings traveled in long lines toward Earth. Everything humanity had built among the stars was being abandoned. Captain Kyung-soo watched the last. Council transport leave Terminus Station. The station had been a joint human-alien research facility for 30 years. Now it was being stripped bare. Anything with human technology was being removed or destroyed. "That's the last of them, Captain," his engineering chief Boram reported. She was a small woman with oil-stained hands and eyes that missed nothing. "They took the fusion reactors, the computer cores, even the food synthesizers." Kyung-soo nodded. The council species were thorough. They didn't want to leave behind anything that might help humanity survive on its own. "What about our people?" "Final transport leaves in 6 hours, Boram said. Just essential crew until then. We'll shut down the station and head home." Home. Earth seemed very far away after all these years in space. Kyung-soo had been born on Terminus Station. This was his home. Soon it would be empty and dark, just another piece of metal floating in the void. "Sir?" the communications officer called out. "Urgent message from Dr. Ji-hoon's deep space station." Ji-hoon's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired and worried. His research station had been working around the clock to track the approaching alien fleet. "The unknown contacts are moving faster than we calculated," Ji-hoon said. "They'll reach the outer council territories in 15 cycles, not 25 like we thought." Kyung-soo felt cold. "Have you told the council?" "I've sent them everything. Energy readings, trajectory plots, even visual confirmation from the long-range telescopes. They won't listen. They think it's all fake data designed to make them keep us around." On the screen, Ji-hoon pulled up a star chart. Red markers showed the path of the incoming fleet. It was heading straight for the most populated council worlds. "There are thousands of ships," Ji-hoon continued. "Maybe tens of thousands. Their energy signatures are completely unknown, and they're not responding to any communication attempts." "Could they be peaceful?" Kyung-soo asked. though he already knew the answer. Peaceful fleets don't move in military formations, Ji-hoon replied. These ships are arranged for maximum combat effectiveness. Whatever they want, they're prepared to fight for it. The transmission ended, leaving Kyung-soo alone with his thoughts. In the engineering bay, Bo-ram was still working. She had been studying council technology for months, taking apart their equipment to understand how it worked. Officially, it was to help with the evacuation. Unofficially, she was learning everything she could before they lost access forever. Bo-ram, Kyung-soo called over the intercom. How much council tech have you figured out? Her voice crackled back through the speakers. Enough, Captain! Their energy weapons, their shield systems, they're faster than light drives. I've got schematics for most of it. And can we build any of it? There was a pause. With the right materials and enough time, yes. It won't be as pretty as theirs, but it'll work. Kyung-soo made a decision that would change everything. Pack it all up. Everything you've learned. We're taking it with us. On Earth, President Yoon-ji sat in the emergency session of the Global Defense Council. The room was full of military leaders, scientists, and politicians. Everyone looked grim. The reports from the edge of the galaxy were getting worse every day. General Chang-min stood at the front of the room, pointing to a holographic display of the galaxy. The unknown fleet is now confirmed at over 50,000 vessels. They're moving in a straight line toward the heart of Council space. No deviations, no exploratory missions. This is an invasion force. What's the Council's response? Asked Dr. Sang-woo, the head of xenobiology research. They're mobilizing their fleets, General Chang-min replied. But they're still insisting this is somehow our fault. Half of them think we're in league with these aliens. President Yoon-ji shook her head. Even now, facing an unknown threat, the Council couldn't put aside their prejudice against humanity. What about our people? The evacuations? Proceeding on schedule, the general said. All civilian populations will be back on Earth within 10 cycles. Military and research personnel are staying until the last moment. Dr. Sang-woo raised his hand. I've been analyzing the data from Dr. Ji-hoon's station. The energy patterns from these ships are very strange. They don't match any known technology. Explain, President Yoon-ji said. Council technology is based on controlled energy fields. Very precise, very efficient. These alien ships are different. Their energy patterns are organic, like they're alive. The room fell silent. The idea of living starships was something from horror stories, not real life. Are you saying these ships are biological? General Chang-min asked. I'm saying they don't follow the rules of normal technology, Dr. Sang-woo replied. That could make them very dangerous. Or very vulnerable. We won't know until we see them in action. Meanwhile, on the far side of the galaxy, Commander Taemin was leading the evacuation of the human research colony on Vega Prime. His small fleet of transport ships was loading. The last of the colonists when his sensor operator made an announcement that changed everything. Commander, I'm picking up distress signals. Multiple sources. They're coming from the Kepler sector. Taemin knew that sector. It was mostly Altaran colonies, some of the oldest settlements outside their home system. What kind of distress signals? Emergency evacuation requests, planetary defense failures, and then nothing. The signals just stop. The bridge crew looked at each other. The Kepler sector was 3 days away at maximum speed. 3 days away from Earth and safety. Sir, his tactical officer Yu-jin said quietly. Our orders are to return to Earth immediately. Taemin stared at the star chart. He thought about the Altaran colonies. They had families too. Children who had never done anything wrong except be born to a species that had cast humanity out. Plot a course for the Kepler sector, he said. Sir, our orders. I heard our orders, Taemin cut him off. But there are people dying out there. We're the only ones close enough to help. Marine Sergeant Dongwoo spoke up from his position near the tactical station. Commander, we're a transport fleet. 3 ships, minimal weapons. What can we do against whatever destroyed Altaran planetary defenses? It was a good question. The Altarans had some of the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy. If their colonies had fallen, what chance did a small human fleet have? Maybe nothing, Taemin admitted. But we have to try. That's what humans do. The fleet changed course, heading away from Earth and toward the unknown threat. Behind them, the last human colony in the sector went dark as the evacuation was completed. Ahead of them, the stars seemed dimmer somehow, as if something was eating the light itself. Back on Terminus Station, Captain Kyung-soo received word of Taemin's decision. Part of him admired the commander's courage. Part of him thought it was suicide. "Captain," Boram called from the engineering bay, "I'm reading massive energy discharges from the Kepler sector. Something big just happened out there." Kyung-soo looked at the readings. Whatever was attacking the Council worlds was more powerful than anyone had imagined. The energy signatures were off the charts. "Boram, how long until you finish packing the tech data?" 2 hours, Captain. You have 1 hour. Then we leave." As the human evacuation continued, the unknown fleet moved deeper into Council space. Behind them, they left empty worlds and silent space stations. Whatever they were, whatever they wanted, they were taking it by force. The Council had wanted humanity gone. Now they were about to face their greatest threat alone. Commander Taemin's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler sector and found hell waiting for them. Where Alteran colonies should have been broadcasting their locations, there was only silence. Where space stations should have been busy with traffic, there was only wreckage floating in the void. "My God," Yujin whispered from her tactical station. "What happened here?" The main screen showed the remains of Kepler Prime, the sector's main world. The planet was still there, but it looked wrong. The once blue oceans were now black. The continents were covered in some kind of dark growth that pulsed with sickly light. No cities were visible from orbit. No signs of life at all. "Sir, I'm detecting movement," the sensor operator reported. "Something big on the far side of the planet." The image shifted, and Taemin saw his first Devourer ship. It was unlike anything in the galaxy's databases. The vessel was enormous, easily 3 times the size of a Council battleship. But it wasn't made of metal or energy fields. It was alive. The ship's hull was black and organic, covered in what looked like veins that carried glowing fluid. Tendrils stretched out from its sides, wrapping around chunks of planetary debris and pulling them into openings that opened and closed like mouths. As they watched, the ship grew larger, incorporating the consumed matter into its own structure. "It's eating the planet," Sergeant Dongwu said in horror. More shapes moved in the darkness around Kepler Prime. Dozens of the bioships, all different sizes, all feeding on what remained of the Alteran world. Some were as small as fighters. Others were so large they could have swallowed a space station whole. "Commander, we need to leave," Yujin said urgently. "Now." But before they could move, the Devourer ships noticed them. The smaller ones detached from the feeding swarm and began moving toward the human fleet. They moved like living things flowing through space instead of flying. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Taemin ordered. "Maximum speed away from the planet." The transport ships turned and ran, but they weren't fast enough. The Devourer vessels caught up with them in minutes. They didn't use energy weapons or missiles. Instead, they extended tendrils from their hulls and tried to grab the human ships like a predator catching prey. "Return fire," Taemin shouted. The human ships had only basic defensive weapons, but they used them. Particle beams and kinetic rounds struck the Devourer ships, tearing holes in their organic hulls. But the holes sealed themselves within seconds, and the creatures kept coming. One of the transports wasn't fast enough. Tendrils wrapped around its hull and began pulling it toward a gaping mouth that opened in the Devourer's side. Taemin could hear the crew screaming over the radio as their ship was slowly crushed. "All power to weapons," he ordered. "Target the thing holding Transport 7. The combined fire from both remaining ships concentrated on the creature's tendrils. The organic cables were severed, and Transport 7 broke free. But the Devourer barely seemed to notice the damage. It just grew new tendrils and kept hunting. The human fleet finally escaped into hyperspace, leaving the horror of Kepler behind. But the image of those living ships would haunt them forever. Back in Council space, the news was spreading panic across dozens of worlds. The Vextai had lost contact with 3 colonies. The Mordun Crystal Gardens on Harmony Station had gone silent. Even the Alteran homeworld was mobilizing its defenses as reports of the Devourers reached them. In the Council chambers on Nexus Prime, the emergency session was chaos. Representatives from every species were talking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of fear and confusion. "Order! Order!" Speaker Veltar called out, his silver skin pale with stress. "We must maintain calm." The Vextai military commander, General Rixka, stood with all 4 of his arms spread wide. "Calm? Half our territory is gone. These creatures have destroyed everything in their path. Our most advanced weapons barely scratch them. What do we know about their capabilities?" asked Elder Morden Sylvan, her crystalline body chiming with worry. They adapt, General Rixka replied grimly. Our energy weapons work the first time we use them. By the second attack, the creatures have modified their hulls to resist. By the third attack, our weapons are useless. The revelation sent a chill through the chamber. The Council's technology was based on precise, efficient energy systems. If the Devourers could adapt to those weapons, the galaxy's defenders were in serious trouble. What about kinetic weapons? Someone asked. Physical projectiles? We stopped using those technologies centuries ago, another representative replied. They're too crude, too unreliable. Too human, the Alteran ambassador added with disgust, then caught himself. Even now, facing extinction, old prejudices were hard to overcome. On Earth, the emergency situation room was receiving reports from across the galaxy. President Yunji watched the tactical displays as red zones spread across the star charts like a disease. Every red marker represented a world that had gone silent. Dr. Sang-Woo was studying video footage from the few survivors who had escaped the Devourer attacks. Their technology is definitely biological, he reported. But it's not natural evolution. Someone or something created these beings as weapons. Weapons against what? General Changmin asked. Against us. Against all technological civilization. Look at this. Dr. Sang-Woo brought up close-up images of Devourer ships. They don't just eat matter. They're specifically designed to consume the materials we use for starships, space stations, and cities. They're anti-technology weapons. President Yunji studied the horrifying images. How do we fight something like that? We don't, General Changmin said quietly. Our orders are clear. Fortress Earth. Pull back all our forces and defend the home system. Let the Council handle their own problems, even if they can't? Dr. Sang-Woo asked. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the answer to that question. If the Council fell, Earth would be next. The Devourers wouldn't stop at the arbitrary borders between Council space and human space. They would consume everything. Meanwhile, in the ruins of the Kepler sector, something stirred in the darkness between dead worlds. The Prime Devourer was ancient beyond measure, older than the Council, older than recorded history. It had consumed entire galaxies before coming to this one. For millions of years it had waited in the void between galaxies, slowly gathering strength. Now it was awake and hungry. The small fleet of scout ships it had sent ahead was reporting back on the new feeding ground. This galaxy was rich with life and technology. Billions of beings had built cities and ships and space stations, all perfect food for the swarm. The Prime Devourer could taste their energy from across the star systems, but there was something else. Something that didn't fit the pattern. The scout ships had encountered beings that fought differently. They used crude weapons and unpredictable tactics. They didn't follow the efficient patterns of the other species. The Prime Devourer was curious about these strange beings. In its long existence, it had devoured thousands of species. Most followed similar patterns, logical, efficient, predictable. These new ones were different. They were chaotic, violent, willing to fight even when victory was impossible. The Prime Devourer sent new orders to its swarm. Find these chaotic beings, study them, learn what made them different, then consume them like all the rest. Back on Earth, Engineer Boram was working in the depths of the military research facility. Around her, teams of scientists and engineers were studying the Council technology she had smuggled out of the evacuation zones. The energy systems are impressive, she reported to Admiral Minho during his daily briefing. But they're too complex. Too many precision components. One damaged part and the whole system fails. Can we improve them? Boram smiled grimly. We can make them more human. Cruder but harder to break. More redundant systems. Less efficiency, more reliability. It wasn't much, but it was a start. If humanity was going to face the Devourers, they would need every advantage they could get. The Council had expelled them from civilized space. Soon they might be the only thing standing between civilization and total annihilation. The emergency broadcast from Nexus Prime reached Earth just as the last human transport ships were arriving home. President Yunji watched the transmission in the Situation Room, surrounded by her military leaders and advisors. On the screen, Speaker Veltar looked like he had aged 100 years in the past few days. The Galactic Council formally requests immediate assistance from all available forces, Veltar said, his voice heavy with desperation. The Devourer threat has exceeded all projections. We have lost 70% of our territory and 40% of our population. Our defensive fleets have been overwhelmed. The transmission ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. General Changmin was the first to speak. They threw us out of civilized space, he said bitterly. Now they want us to save them. How many people are we talking about? President Yunji asked. Dr. Sang-woo pulled up the population figures. Approximately 4 billion beings across the remaining council worlds. If the Devourers maintain their current pace, they'll all be dead within 30 days. And if we help, Admiral Minho asked, we might slow them down, maybe buy time for evacuation. But fighting the Devourers means going into their territory. It means walking into certain death. President Yunji looked around the room at the faces of her advisors. She saw fear, anger, and something else, something that made her proud to be human. Admiral Minho, how many ships can we field? Every available vessel? Maybe 800 ships. Mostly smaller craft. The Devourers have ships the size of cities. And our chances of victory? Minho was quiet for a long moment. 0, Madam President. This is a suicide mission. President Yunji nodded slowly. Then we better make it count. Admiral, begin mobilization. Every ship, every volunteer. We're going to war. Madam President, General Changmin protested. Our duty is to protect Earth. We can't sacrifice our entire fleet for people who cast us out. Our duty, President Yunji replied firmly, is to be human. And humans don't abandon people in need even when those people hate us. Within hours, the call went out across Earth and its colonies. Volunteers were needed for the most dangerous mission in human history. The response was overwhelming. Retired military personnel came out of retirement. Civilian ship captains volunteered their vessels. Even teenagers lied about their ages to join the fleet. Captain Wu Jin was among the first to volunteer. He had been a transport pilot during the evacuation, but his ship could be armed. His crew included pilot Hai Wan, a young woman who could fly anything with engines, and gunner Seok Jin, a former Marine who had been itching for a real fight. You sure about this, Captain? Hae-won asked as they prepared their ship for combat modifications. The Devourers eat starships for breakfast. I'm sure, Wu Jin replied. My grandfather fought in the colony wars. He always said the hardest choice isn't whether to fight. It's whether to fight for people who don't appreciate it. Meanwhile, Boram was working around the clock to upgrade the human fleet with salvaged council technology. The modifications were crude but effective. Human ships weren't elegant, but they were tough. Adding council energy shields and weapons made them even tougher. How are the weapon tests going? Admiral Minho asked during one of his visits to the engineering bay. Better than expected, Boram reported. The council weapons are precise, but our targeting systems are more adaptable. We can modify our attack patterns faster than they can. And the Devourer adaptation ability? Boram grinned. That's where we have an advantage. Council tactics are logical and predictable. Human tactics are chaotic. If the Devourers can't predict our patterns, they can't adapt as easily. The human fleet assembled at the edge of the solar system. 800 ships of every size and type, from massive battleships to tiny fighters. They looked like a scrapyard compared to the elegant council fleets, but they were ready to fight. Admiral In-soo had been chosen to lead the mission. He was old, experienced, and had no illusions about their chances. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the fleet he was about to lead to their deaths. Admiral, his communications officer Na Young reported, all ships ready for hyperspace jump. Any last messages from Earth? Yes, sir. President Yunji wanted me to tell you that the whole planet is proud of you. In-soo nodded. He thought about his family back on Earth. His children would grow up in a galaxy where humanity stood for something that was worth dying for. All ships jump to hyperspace. Destination: Nexus Prime. The human fleet disappeared into the swirling tunnel of hyperspace, racing toward the heart of Council space. Behind them, Earth waited in silence. Ahead of them, the Devourers continued their relentless advance. They emerged from hyperspace to find Nexus Prime under siege. The great station that had been the center of galactic civilization for 1,000 years was surrounded by Devourer ships. The biovessels were slowly taking apart the station piece by piece, consuming its technology and leaving nothing behind. My God, someone whispered over the comm. Look at the size of them. The largest Devourer ships were the size of moons. Their organic hulls pulsed with veins of energy. and their tendrils reached out for miles in every direction. They moved through space like giant sea creatures swimming through an ocean of stars. All ships, attack formation. Admiral Insu ordered. Target the smaller vessels first. Work our way up to the big ones. The human fleet spread out and attacked. Their weapons were a mix of kinetic rounds, energy beams, and experimental plasma charges. The diversity of their arsenal was their strength. The Devourers couldn't adapt to everything at once. Captain Wu Jin led his squadron against a cluster of fighter-sized Devourers. The bioships moved like living things, twisting and turning in patterns that defied physics. But Heiwan was a gifted pilot, and she matched their movements with her own unpredictable flight path. Target locked, Seokjin announced. Firing plasma charges. The experimental weapon struck the Devourer and tore a massive hole in its hull. But instead of dying, the creature began to change. Its flesh flowed like liquid, sealing the wound and growing thicker armor where it had been hit. It's adapting, Heiwan reported, switching to kinetic rounds. The solid projectiles punched through the creature's new armor like it was paper. The Devourer writhed in pain and tried to escape, but Wu Jin's squadron stayed on it until it finally died. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships used every weapon they had, switching tactics constantly to stay ahead of the Devourer's adaptation ability. It was working, but the cost was enormous. For every Devourer they killed, they lost 2 or 3 human ships. Admiral, Nayang reported. We're receiving a transmission from the station. It's Speaker Veltar. The Altaran's face appeared on the screen. He looked exhausted and defeated. Admiral Insu, thank you for coming. But it's too late. The Prime Devourer is here. Insu looked at his tactical display. Something massive was moving through hyperspace toward their position. Something so large it barely fit on the sensors. How big? He asked. Planet-sized, Veltar replied. It's the source of all the others. If we can't stop it here, it will consume the entire galaxy. The Prime Devourer dropped out of hyperspace like a living nightmare. It was easily the size of Earth, its surface covered in billions of smaller bioships that swarmed around it like insects. At its center was a mouth big enough to swallow a space station whole. All ships, Admiral Insu announced over the fleet comm. This is what we came for. We may not win, but we're going to make them pay for every world they've taken. The human fleet turned toward the Prime Devourer and accelerated to attack speed. Behind them, Nexus Prime burned. Ahead of them, the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced waited with hunger older than civilizations. 800 human ships against a creature that had devoured entire galaxies. The odds were impossible, but humans had never been good at accepting impossible odds. The battle for the galaxy's survival began with 800 human ships charging toward a creature the size of a planet. Admiral Insu watched his tactical display as the Prime Devourer's escort ships moved to intercept them. There were thousands of the biovessels ranging from fighter-sized drones to city-sized battleships. All squadrons, engage the escorts, Insu ordered. Clear a path to the main target. The human fleet split into attack groups, each one focusing on a different section of the Devourer swarm. They moved with the chaos and unpredictability that had always marked human warfare. No elegant formations, no perfect coordination. Just aggressive, relentless attacks that the bioships couldn't predict or counter. Captain Wu Jin's squadron dove into the thick of the enemy formation. Around him, Devourer ships writhed and twisted through space like living snakes. Their hulls opened and closed in patterns that hurt to look at. Tendrils reached out to grab human ships and crush them. Stay close to me, Wu Jin told his pilots. Don't let them separate us. Heiwan pulled their ship into a spinning dive that no sane pilot would attempt. Behind them, a massive Devourer opened its hull like a flower, revealing rows of grinding teeth. The human ship slipped between the teeth and fired plasma charges directly into the creature's internal organs. Direct hit, Seokjin shouted. The thing's coming apart! But for every Devourer they killed, 2 more took its place. The Prime Devourer was constantly spawning new ships from its surface, replacing losses faster than the humans could inflict them. On his flagship, Admiral Insu studied the readings from Dr. Sangwoo's quantum weapon. The device was designed to disrupt the neural networks that connected all the Devourer ships to their mother creature. But it had to be delivered directly to the Prime Devourer's core, deep inside its planet-sized body. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, we're losing ships faster than projected. At this rate, we'll be wiped out before we reach the target. Insu looked at the casualty reports. Half his fleet was already gone, and they had barely scratched the surface of the enemy forces. But the mission remained the same. "All ships, this is Admiral Insu," he announced over the fleet comm. "I'm taking the flagship directly to the target. All other vessels, cover our approach and keep those escorts busy." "Sir," Nayang protested. "That's suicide. The Prime Devourer's defenses will tear us apart." "Probably," Insu agreed. "But someone has to deliver the weapon, and I'm the expendable one here." The flagship broke away from the main battle and accelerated toward the Prime Devourer. The creature noticed their approach and began turning its massive bulk to face them. As it moved, Insu could see the true scale of the thing. It wasn't just a ship or even a creature. It was an entire ecosystem designed for destruction. The surface was covered in millions of smaller bioships that moved like antibodies in a vast organism. Weapon ports opened and closed in breathing patterns. And at the center, a mouth big enough to swallow moons began to open. "Sir, massive energy buildup from the target," the sensor operator reported. "It's preparing to fire." The Prime Devourer's attack came as a wave of pure destructive force that swept across space like a tsunami. The first human ships it touched simply vanished, disintegrated at the molecular level. The wave spread outward, destroying everything in its path. "Evasive maneuvers," Insu shouted. The flagship dove and rolled, trying to avoid the deadly energy wave. But it was too big, too fast. The wave caught them and began tearing the ship apart piece by piece. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, Nayang reported. "Life support failing. Structural integrity at 20%. Insu looked at the tactical display. They were still miles away from the Prime Devourer's core. At their current rate of damage, they wouldn't make it halfway. "All power to engines," he ordered, "and open a channel to the fleet." "Admiral, the communication array is damaged," Nayang said. "Then broadcast on all frequencies. Make sure everyone hears this." Insu stood up from his command chair and faced the main screen. Behind him, his bridge crew continued working even as their ship disintegrated around them. "This is Admiral Insu to all human vessels," he said. "We're going to ram the target. I repeat, we are going to ram the Prime Devourer. All ships continue the mission. Protect Earth. Make them remember that humans don't quit." The flagship accelerated toward the Prime Devourer's mouth. Around them, the creature's defenses focused their fire on the approaching ship. Energy beams and living missiles struck the hull, but the ship kept coming. "Sir, we're breaking apart," Nayang reported. "Hull integrity at 5%. How far to target?" 10 kilometers to the outer mouth. 20 to the core." Insu nodded. "It would have to be enough." "All hands, abandon ship. Nayang, get to the escape pods." "I'm staying, Admiral." "That's an order." "With respect, sir, no. Someone needs to maintain communications with the weapon." "I'm staying." Insu looked at his young communications officer and felt a surge of pride. This was what humanity was about. Not the violence or the aggression that the Council had feared, but the willingness to sacrifice for others. The flagship plunged into the Prime Devourer's mouth like a missile. The bioship's internal defenses tried to stop them, but the human ship was moving too fast. They smashed through layers of organic armor and defensive systems, going deeper and deeper into the creature's body. "Weapon-armed," Nayang reported as sparks flew from her console. "Core is 3 kilometers ahead. Can we make it?" "Unknown, sir. We're flying on debris and attitude thrusters now." The ship shuddered as something massive tried to crush them from above. Insu could hear the hull groaning under the pressure, but they kept moving forward deeper into the alien nightmare. 1 kilometer to target, Nayang announced. Weapon ready for deployment. Insu reached for the firing control. Through the view screen, he could see the Prime Devourer's core, a pulsing mass of neural tissue the size of a city. This was the brain that controlled the entire swarm. If they could destroy it, the Devourers would lose their coordination. "Admiral," Nayang said quietly, "it's been an honor serving with you." "The honor was mine," Insu replied. "For Earth, for humanity, for everyone we couldn't save." He pressed the firing control. Dr. Sangwoo's quantum weapon detonated in the heart of the Prime Devourer. The explosion was small by galactic standards, but its effects were enormous. The quantum disruption spread through the creature's neural networks like a virus, severing connections and causing massive system failures. The Prime Devourer convulsed in agony. Across the galaxy, every Devourer ship connected to the collective network suddenly stopped moving. Some began attacking each other. Others simply shut down and drifted in space. The coordinated swarm became a chaotic mob of confused organisms. Captain Wu Jin watched from his damaged fighter as the massive bioships around him began to dissolve. Without the Prime Devourer's guidance, they couldn't maintain their complex biological systems. They were dying. "All ships, this is Captain Wu Jin," he broadcast to the surviving human vessels. "The Admiral did it. The Devourers are down. Begin search and rescue for survivors." But there were so few survivors. Of the 800 ships that had begun the mission, fewer than 50 remained operational. The rest were wreckage floating in space, their crews lost in the final battle. On Nexus Prime, Speaker Veltar watched the Devourer ships dissolving around his station. The ancient Alteran had lived for 800 years, but he had never seen anything like this. A species they had cast out had sacrificed everything to save them. "Open a channel to the human fleet," he ordered. Captain Wu Jin's face appeared on the screen. The young human looked exhausted and grief-stricken, but alive. "Captain," Veltar said formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, I wish to express our deepest gratitude. Your people have saved us all." "We didn't do it for gratitude," Wu Jin replied. "We did it because it was right." The words stung. Veltar realized that humanity had just demonstrated the very qualities that the Council claimed to value: wisdom, sacrifice, protection of the innocent. They had done it while being hated and rejected by those they saved. "Captain, the Council would like to formally invite humanity to rejoin civilized space, not as junior members but as full partners, as guardians." Wu Jin was quiet for a moment. "I'll pass that along to Earth, Speaker. But we were never really gone. We'll be here when you need us again." The transmission ended, leaving Veltar alone with his thoughts. Around him, the station's crew began the work of rebuilding, but the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had walked into the fire and emerged as something new, not the violent barbarians the Council had feared, but the protectors the galaxy had always needed. They had proven that true civilization wasn't measured by technology or elegance, but by the willingness to sacrifice for others. The Council had departed from them, abandoning humanity to face an unknown threat alone. But humans had walked into the fire anyway, not for glory or recognition, but because someone had to. That was what made them human, and that was what made them heroes. In the weeks that followed, as the galaxy began to rebuild, memorials were erected on every Council world. They honored the human crews who had died saving species that had rejected them. Admiral Insu's name was spoken with reverence across 100 worlds.